Hi everyone, I hope you're doing very well. My name is Juan and welcome back to another book review. So today we're going to talk about the great novel Alias Grace by the Canadian writer Margaret Atwood. And if you appreciate my reviews and would like to show your support, please give this review a like and subscribe to my channel. That way this video will get to more people who might also enjoy it. Thanks. Okay, let's talk about Alias Grace, which was first published in 1996. I think that Alias Grace is one of the best novels by Margaret Atwood, at least one of the best by her I have read. It is historical fiction and it is based on a real person named Grace Marks who lived in Canada in the 19th century. Atwood apparently came across her story in the 1970s. So the real Grace Marks was an Irish-Canadian maid who was convicted of killing her boss and his housekeeper in 1843. The case was controversial at the time. Before Atwood's account of what could possibly have happened in Alias Grace, there was a 19th century book about it entitled Life in the Clearings versus the Bush and written by Susanna Moodie. I don't think that Susanna Moodie is well known outside of Canada. I certainly only know about her thanks to Margaret Atwood. In fact, you know, Canadian literature in English is not as well known internationally, I think, as other national literary outputs in English. For many people, Margaret Atwood is the only Canadian author they know, and the other internationally famous Canadian author I could possibly mention, I think, would be Michael Ondaatje. So I would love to hear from Canadian readers about this because I would love to read more Canadian books, either in English or French. Anyway, let's go back to Alias Grace. So in the novel, Grace has already been convicted of murder, but some people believe she's innocent and they will try to help her, okay? That's kind of the gist of it without any spoilers. The problem is that Grace doesn't remember what happened. Only with the help of Dr. Jordan will she begin to make some progress. However, the doctor's sanity will be tested, and the more time he spends with Grace, the less he'll know whether he can trust what she tells him is true. The novel is narrated from Dr. Jordan's point of view, although we also get Grace's point of view when she tells her version of the events to the doctor. This novel has a lot to say about the human mind and memory. How reliable are our memories? How accurate are Grace's memories? Does she lie? Or does she misremember? You'll have to read the novel and try to answer those questions for yourself, of course. But in a society with deep gender inequality, the word of a poor woman like Grace isn't worth much. But that does not necessarily mean that she's innocent either. However, far from being a criminal mastermind, Grace seems to be a woman whom men use for their purposes, beginning with her alcoholic and abusive father and going on to Dr. Jordan, because you know, sure, Dr. Jordan seems kind and is trying to help Grace prove her innocence, but he's also using her to try out his theories on psychology. If you read this novel, you will find out what happened. You'll find out who committed the murders, but do not go in thinking that this is a crime novel because it really isn't. To me, Alias Grace is more an exploration of gender inequality and the obscure corners of the human mind at a time when people knew even less about that than we do now. And I was fascinated by Atwood's portrayal of life in a British colony. Someone like Grace Marks goes to Canada for a better life, but she's forced to work as a servant. Hardly the North American dream, right? And not only must she work as a servant, but she is then accused of murder and sent to prison for years. So if you want to see how Margaret Atwood wrote the story and want to know what happens in it, you know what to do. I'll link to the books I review in the description box for each video so you can buy your copy of Alias Grace at no extra cost and support my channel. And well, I think this is all I can say about Alias Grace without spoiling it for people who have not read it yet. Now I'm going to summarize the plot and talk about Alias Grace in more detail, and there will be some spoilers, probably a lot of spoilers, so you have been warned. If you don't want to hear any spoilers about Alias Grace from me, you should stop watching right about now, and I will see you again very soon, I hope, for another video. Okay, for those of you who are still here, I am now going to summarize the plot and share more thoughts I had on Alias Grace. The whole novel takes place in Canada, and it begins in the year 1859. Grace Marks has now been in jail for many years, serving a death sentence. She was found guilty of killing a rich man named Thomas Kinnear and his housekeeper, Nancy Montgomery. Due to good behavior, however, the governor has granted her permission to leave jail for a few days. Grace will spend that time working as a housekeeper for the governor's wife. So the governor's wife belongs to a social reform group that believes that Grace is innocent. Reverend Veringer also belongs to that group. They have requested a pardon for Grace several times, but so far always failed. Then enters Dr. Simon Jordan. He's a medical doctor who has become more interested in psychology. So Dr. Jordan begins working with Grace. She claims to have no memories of the murders, but Dr. Jordan thinks he can help her remember. Their sessions take place every afternoon. At first, Grace doesn't trust the doctor, and he finds her behavior a little bit strange. However, Grace gradually trusts him and begins to make progress. Over time, Grace tells Dr. Jordan everything she remembers happened. The narrative structure becomes more complex because it includes another timeline now. On the one hand, present events continue, but we now also have an account of what happened in the past. Present events continue to be narrated in the third person, but now from Dr. Jordan's point of view, while the past events are told in the first person by Grace. So we have 2 points of view, Dr. Jordan's and Grace's. So Grace tells Dr. Jordan her whole life story. She was born and raised in Ireland. Her father was an abusive alcoholic. The family emigrated to Canada, but her mother didn't make the trip and died on the ship. Once in Canada, Grace was forced to work by her father. This is how Grace became a live-in servant. First, she worked for a wealthy family in Toronto, and she became friends with another servant, a woman named Mary Whitney, and a key character in the story. So Mary became Grace's best friend and mother figure at that time. One of their employer's sons got Mary pregnant, and because he refused to marry her, she decided to have an abortion. Unfortunately, Mary did not survive the operation. Grace was too sad to keep working for that family after what happened to her friend, so she moved to the country to a little village called Richmond Hill. There she worked for a rich Scottish man named Mr. Kinnear. There were 2 other servants in the house, the housekeeper, Nancy Montgomery, and the stable hand, James McDermott. Apart from being Mr. Kinnear's servant, Nancy also slept with him, and there was some tension between Grace and Nancy because Nancy saw a rival in Grace. While Mr. Kinnear was away, Nancy fired Grace and James. Not happy with that, James killed Nancy, and then when Mr. Kinnear came back, James also killed him. Grace tells Dr. Jordan this much, but she cannot tell him any details about both murders because she cannot remember how they happened. Are we supposed to believe Grace's version? Dr. Jordan is not sure. On the one hand, he thinks that Grace is genuinely suffering from amnesia, but on the other hand, he also feels like she's trying to manipulate him. Dr. Jordan's sanity begins to suffer. Not only does he begin to have sexual fantasies, a lot of sexual fantasies, some of them involving Grace, but he also becomes violent, and then he begins to have sex with his landlady, a woman named Mrs. Humphrey. One day, another doctor, Dr. Dupont, hypnotizes Grace, but Grace talks in such an unusual way, and her voice is so different that Dr. Jordan believes that the voice belongs to Mary Whitney. Remember Mary Whitney, the maid who died having an abortion, who had been Grace's best friend and a surrogate mother for her in Toronto, okay? That one. This strange voice that Dr. Jordan believes belongs to Mary Whitney claims that she and McDermott murdered Mr. Kinnear and Nancy Montgomery, and that Grace is indeed innocent. But this is too much for Dr. Jordan to bear, so he leaves town for good. Grace then spends 13 more years in prison until she's finally granted a pardon. She's 46 years old when she's set free finally, so she travels south to Ithaca, New York to start a new life in the US. There she marries James Walsh, who is someone she knew from her time at Richmond Hill. Although James testified against her in the trial all those years ago, he now believes that Grace is innocent. So the novel ends with Grace making a quilt with material from her prison night dress, Mary Whitney's petticoat, and Nancy's dress. So in the end, the 3 women, Grace, Mary, and Nancy, are united symbolically in the quilt Grace makes. Alias Grace is a novel that deals with ambiguity. Things are not black or white, and the novel can prompt discussions about mental health and the inner works of the human mind, but also about social class differences and gender inequality. Grace Marks, like all the other women in the novel, lived all her life subordinated to men. She even ends up marrying a man who testified against her. Sure, by then he had changed his mind and apologized, but still, who would marry someone who was in part responsible for sending them to jail? Anyway, now I would love to hear what you have to say about Alias Grace, so please let me know your thoughts if you have read it. And if you haven't read it yet, let me know what you think about my review and if you think you will read the novel now. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with your friends on social media. You can also follow me on Twitter and or Instagram at Bookish Islander, so we can talk about books on other platforms too. This is all from me. I hope to see you again very soon for another book review or bookish video. Bye for now.